The slap landed so hard I heard the crack before I even felt the fire explode across my cheek. My head jerked sideways, my teeth clacked together, and the sting spread through my face until my vision blurred with tears I had not chosen. Gasps erupted around me, hundreds of voices, sharp with shock, the music collapsing into silence as if the band themselves had been struck. Then the cold splash hit me. A wave of red wine poured over my chest, soaking the cream silk of my dress until it clung to me like a second skin, heavy and humiliating, the crimson spreading downward in grotesque streaks that looked like wounds. The glass dangled empty in Rebecca's manicured hand, her wedding diamonds flashing in the chandelier light as though mocking my pain. 300 guests froze where they stood. Forks suspended champagne glasses halfway to lips, eyes wide and unblinking. I could feel them staring, each gaze like a dagger pinning me to the marble floor. My ears rang with the echo of the slap, my heart slamming against my ribs, my breath catching in short, panicked bursts. Rebecca's voice came shrill and sharp, slicing through the heavy silence. "How dare you ruin my perfect day? You clumsy fool! Can you not manage a single step without destroying everything?" She looked radiant in her white gown seconds earlier, but now she was transformed, a vision of rage, her face contorted, her bouquet trembling with fury. And then came the blow that cut deeper than her palm, deeper than the wine. "Rebecca is right. You should have been more careful." Fernando's voice, my husband's voice, cold, clear, cruel. He stepped closer to her, his hand brushing her arm as though she were the fragile victim and I the aggressor. "This is her wedding day. You nearly destroyed her dress." The humiliation was complete. My chest squeezed tight, my throat burned, my pulse throbbed against my temple. The man who had vowed to protect me had just declared his allegiance in front of every witness, and it was not to me. Whispers ignited among the crowd. I saw mouths cover in shock, saw heads tilt closer to share. Hurried words, felt judgment radiate like heat from every corner. Some faces showed pity, others a twisted fascination as if my public degradation were a form of entertainment. Rebecca leaned into Fernando, her voice breaking into a pitiful whimper. "I only wanted to thank her for helping, and this is how she treats me." My fingers hovered at my burning cheek, trembling, unable to form words. My tongue felt heavy, useless, my body locked in the paralysis of shame. I wanted to scream that it had been an accident, that all I had done was step forward to hug her when she called me that my heel had caught the delicate beating of her endless train. A few beads had popped loose, nothing more. But what was the point? To Rebecca, my existence was a flaw. To Fernando, she was always right. I stood drenched, shivering under the cruel gaze of family and strangers alike, when another sound pierced the air. A slow, deliberate rhythm of footsteps against marble. Tap, tap, tap. Each step resonated through the hushed room, slicing through whispers, forcing every head to turn. The crowd shifted, parting as Travis the groom advanced. His face was carved with fury, his jaw clenched, his dark eyes fixed forward with a focus that seemed to vibrate the very air. He moved like a man walking into battle shoulders, squared each stride more precise than the last. My stomach twisted. Why was he coming here? Why was he looking at me, at us? He reached the microphone, his tall frame towering over the stand. His hand gripped the metal knuckles, straining white, and he tapped it twice. The sound cracked through the silence like gunshots demanding obedience. 300 bodies straightened instinctively. Conversations died mid-breath. The chandeliers themselves seemed to glitter more fiercely in anticipation. Travis inhaled, his chest rising, and when he spoke, his voice roared across the hall with the force of judgment itself. "Did you just slap the CEO of Caden Marketing?" The words crashed into the room like a thunderclap. My heart dropped into my stomach. My knees weakened. Gasps tore through the crowd again, louder this time, mixed with exclamations of shock. Recognition sparked in faces all around me like wildfire, leaping from tree to tree. Caden, Marketing. She is, oh my God, Ruth Sinclair. Phones slipped into trembling hands, screens lighting up as guests scrambled to confirm what Travis had just revealed. Waiters who had been frozen against the walls now darted forward, bowing as they rushed to press napkins into my hands, their voices stumbling with apologies. "Ma'am, please let us clean this. Please forgive us." The slap still burned, the wine still clung cold and heavy to my skin, but those sensations faded against the roar in my mind. He had said it. He had spoken aloud the identity I had buried for years, the truth I had hidden to preserve a love I thought was real. Now it was out thrown into the air before 300 witnesses who had just seen me broken, slapped, humiliated. The chandeliers glittered like fire above us, the marble floor gleamed beneath me, and all around the room held its breath. My cheek pulsed with heat, my dress dripped with red, my world tilted on its axis. Nothing would ever be the same again. My name is Ruth Matthews, though very few people here tonight truly know who I am. They see a quiet woman who married into the family 3 years ago. A woman who drives a modest car, who wears department store dresses, who smiles politely at dinners and does not push back when criticized. They believe I am ordinary, almost invisible, and I have let them believe that because it was easier than explaining the truth. The truth is that I live 2 lives. By day, in boardrooms with glass walls that overlook cities and skylines. I am Ruth Sinclair, CEO of Caden Marketing, a company that has shaped brands on 6 continents, a company whispered about in financial circles as a titan. I am the woman who has been on the cover of Forbes, who has signed billion-dollar deals with a flick of a pen. But when I return home, I leave that woman behind. I become Ruth Matthews' wife of Fernando the quiet spouse, who works supposedly in a mid-level marketing job, nothing more. I chose this double life years ago when I decided I wanted love untainted by wealth or power. I wanted to be seen for myself, not my bank account or reputation. At first, it felt noble. Over time, it became a prison of my own design. Fernando has always been respectable in appearance. He works as a regional sales manager at a mid-size company, earning enough to support a comfortable life. When we married, he was proud to call himself the breadwinner, proud to carry me as his wife. I let him believe it. I let him imagine that his salary paid for our house, for the car, for the vacations we took. He never asked questions about the ease with which bills were covered, about the stability of our finances, about the quiet abundance that never seemed to run out. And perhaps I wanted him to stay in that illusion because it protected us both. It kept me from feeling like a threat. It let him feel important. I thought love was enough. I thought loyalty could bridge any gap. I thought family would embrace me if I simply gave them kindness and patience. I was wrong. The cracks began with Rebecca, his younger sister, the golden child, the eternal princess of their family. She grew up spoiled, protected her whims indulged by parents who adored her and a brother who idolized her. As adults, nothing changed. She chose the life of an influencer, though her followers were modest and her income unstable. She lived extravagantly, buying handbags on credit, traveling beyond her means, always drowning in debt, yet projecting glamour to the world. And when the money ran out, she turned to Fernando. Family comes first, he would tell me each time I suggested she needed to stand on her own. She is my little sister. I have to take care of her. At first, I admired his devotion. Then I saw the truth. His loyalty was not noble. It was blind. He excused every misstep, defended every insult, enabled every tantrum. Rebecca criticized me often, sometimes for my appearance, sometimes for my quiet nature, sometimes for imagined slights. She would sneer about my so-called small marketing job, implying I lacked ambition, implying I was lucky to be married to her successful brother. Fernando never corrected her. At best, he stayed silent. At worst, he joined in the ridicule, chuckling as though it were harmless teasing. Each word cut a little deeper, but I told myself it was not worth the battle. Keep the peace, I reminded myself. Do not make waves. This is what love requires. But keeping the peace came at a cost. Over months and years, I shrank. I dimmed my own light so they could shine. I silenced my voice so theirs could be heard. I let them believe I was less so they could feel like more. The day Rebecca announced her engagement to Travis Thompson, the family erupted with excitement. Travis was a successful architect who had recently founded his own firm, and Rebecca saw in him the security she had never earned herself. They had dated only 8 months, but she pushed for a grand wedding, the kind of event that would make headlines in her small social circle. Fernando was thrilled. His sister had finally caught someone worthy, someone accomplished. He never asked how she had managed it so quickly. He never wondered why Travis looked at me oddly when we first met. Because Travis knew me, not as Fernando's quiet wife, but as the woman who had changed his life 5 years ago. He had been young then, unproven, his firm struggling to find its first major client. He had pitched an idea with fire in his eyes, a vision too bold for most. My board had advised against it. Too risky, they warned. Too much money, too little chance. But something about his passion struck me. I remembered the hunger of my own early days, the way it felt to stand on the edge of everything, desperate for one person to believe. I overruled my board. I gave him the contract. Together we launched a campaign that secured 3 developments and established his reputation. His firm thrived, his career soared, and he never forgot who had given him that chance. He recognized me instantly when Fernando introduced us as family. His eyes widened, flickered with confusion, then respect. But when I asked him privately to keep my identity hidden, he nodded. He respected my choice, even if he did not understand it. I believed I could keep both worlds separate. I believed I could stand at family dinners as Ruth Matthews and sit in boardrooms as Ruth Sinclair without collision. I was wrong. From the moment wedding planning began, I sensed the storm building. Rebecca grew more demanding, more controlling. She asked me to handle endless errands, to double-check details, to step in when vendors faltered. She spoke to me as though I were staff, not family. Fernando encouraged it. Ruth can help. Ruth is good at organizing. Ruth does not mind. Every request felt like another chain around my neck, but I smiled and complied. After all, this was her day. Still, I saw the glimmers of something more sinister. Her eyes lingered on me when Travis complimented my dress at rehearsal. Her lips tightened when guests assumed I had helped plan the event. Her tone sharpened whenever I laughed too freely. It was as though my very presence threatened her, though I had done nothing but serve. I convinced myself it was temporary. After the wedding, perhaps she would relax. After the vows, perhaps she would see me as family. Perhaps Fernando would see me as more than a shadow. But standing in that ballroom, wine dripping from my ruined dress, my cheek on fire from her hand, my husband's voice raised against me, I realized the truth. I had buried for years. This family did not want me whole. They wanted me small, compliant, invisible. They wanted my silence, not my strength. They wanted my service, not my soul. And I had given it to them piece by piece until almost nothing was left. Now, in front of 300 witnesses, with chandeliers blazing above and marble gleaming beneath, the mask I had worn so carefully was about to shatter. And once it broke, nothing could hold back what was coming. The morning of the wedding began with a quiet unease I could not shake. The Grand View Manor gleamed like a palace when we arrived, its marble columns reaching skyward, its chandeliers glittering even in daylight. Rebecca swept through the halls like a queen preparing for her coronation, her voice sharp as she directed planners and photographers. I kept to the background, carrying boxes, fetching coffee-pinning boutonnieres. She had been unusually sweet to me that morning, thanking me for little tasks, complimenting my dress, with words that felt coated in honey but tasted like poison. I told myself it was progress. I told myself maybe today, finally, we would find peace. I was wrong. As the ceremony unfolded, Rebecca looked radiant, her designer gown cascading like liquid pearls, her smile dazzling. Travis's face when he saw her walking down the aisle was pure love, and for a brief moment, I allowed hope to bloom. Perhaps this day would heal the rifts. Perhaps joy would soften Rebecca's edge. The guests applauded, the vows were exchanged, and I clapped along, my smile steady even as a quiet ache lingered in my chest. The reception began in a storm of light and sound, violins swelling, champagne flowing, laughter echoing against the high ceilings. Tables groaned under the weight of delicacies, waiters weaving gracefully through the crowd. I moved among the guests, making small talk, always careful not to draw attention. Fernando barely looked at me, his eyes fixed on his sister, his laughter spilling freely whenever she beckoned him near. Still, I kept my smile, telling myself it was only one night. But the cracks widened quickly. During the dinner speeches, Fernando was called to the microphone. I watched him walk with confidence, his glass raised, his smile practiced. My heart fluttered with nervous anticipation. Perhaps tonight, before family and friends, he would speak of us, of me, of our bond. Instead, his words became daggers. "My sister Rebecca has always been special," he declared, his eyes shining as he turned toward her. "She is beautiful, ambitious, everything a man could want in a wife. Travis, you are truly lucky." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My chest tightened. He continued, "Rebecca has never been content to blend into the background. She reaches higher demands, more strives for greatness. That is something I admire." His gaze swept the room until it found mine. "Unlike some people who are content to stay invisible." The implication hung heavy in the air. Guests shifted uncomfortably. I felt heat creep up my neck, the sting of humiliation burning deeper than any slap. The applause that followed was polite but hesitant. Some guests glanced at me, pity etched in their eyes. My smile held brittle and aching, as though if I let it falter, I would shatter entirely. After dinner, I busied myself gathering plates, helping staff clear tables, pretending usefulness to mask the emptiness hollowing my chest. Rebecca danced with Fernando, their laughter rising above the music, their bond impenetrable, leaving me outside looking in. When Travis approached me, his expression softened with concern. "You seem quiet tonight," he said gently. "It is Rebecca's day," I replied, forcing cheer into my voice. "I am happy to stay in the background." His eyes searched mine. "Ruth, are you happy?" The question pierced me, so simple yet so heavy. I opened my mouth, but the answer caught in my throat. "Of course," I whispered, but even to my own ears the word rang hollow. Before he could say more, Rebecca appeared, flushed from dancing, slipping her arm through his possessively. "Travis, come. We need more pictures." She threw me a glance, her smile sharp. "Ruth, could you make sure the cake cutting is set up?" "Of course," I murmured, already moving, my heart pounding with humiliation at being dismissed like a servant. The cake cutting passed without disaster. Guests clapped, cameras flashed, Rebecca basked in the spotlight. I clung to the hope that the worst was behind us, but fate had sharper plans. As I stood near the gift table later, Rebecca's eyes found mine. She called across the room, her voice sweet but loud enough for all to hear. "Ruth, come here, sister-in-law." Surprised, I obeyed, weaving through the crowd. Her arms opened wide, her smile radiant. "I want to thank you for your help today. Come, give me a hug." Relief flooded me. Maybe this was it, the reconciliation I had prayed for. I stepped forward, heart lighter hope fluttering like fragile wings. Then my heel caught on the edge of her train. A faint sound of beads snapping. Her eyes widened in horror. "My dress!" The shriek cut through music and chatter like a blade. Gasps rippled. I froze my hands, rising in instinctive apology. "Rebecca, I am so sorry. I did not mean—" "You did not mean to," she screeched, stepping closer, her voice rising to hysteria. "On my wedding day, in front of everyone. How clumsy, how careless, how typical of you." The damage was barely visible, a few beads scattered across the marble, but her fury painted it as catastrophe. "Rebecca, please let me." The words had barely left my lips before her palm cracked against my cheek. The sound rang like a gunshot. Pain exploded my head, snapping sideways, my skin blazing. Conversation halted. Music stopped. Every guest turned. Time slowed as I raised my hand to my burning face, my vision swimming. Then the wine. She seized a glass from a nearby table and hurled it across me, crimson soaking through silk, cold and sticky, sliding down my skin like liquid shame. "There," she spat, chest heaving. "Now we both have ruined dresses." Silence fell heavier than stone. The crowd stared, some horrified, some stunned, a few almost entertained. My chest convulsed with sobs. I swallowed down, refusing to give them the satisfaction. But then came Fernando, the final dagger. "Ruth, what is wrong with you?" He snapped, his voice loud, cutting through the shocked quiet. "This is Rebecca's day. The least you could do is be careful." He stepped closer to her, draping his arm around her shoulders protectively. "You know how important this is to her. How could you be so careless?" Betrayal twisted in my gut sharper than any blow. My husband had chosen his sister, humiliating me further before 300 people. Rebecca leaned into him, her voice trembling in mock fragility. "I only wanted to thank her. I never thought she would ruin everything." "Do not worry," Fernando soothed, stroking her hair like she was a child. "Ruth should have known better. She always does this." His words sliced me into pieces. I stood trembling, wine dripping from my dress, my cheek burning, my dignity shredded. I was no longer wife, no longer family, only an object of ridicule in the eyes of those who watched. Murmurs began again, whispers rushing like a tide. Guests averted their eyes uncomfortable, yet none stepped forward. The band held their silence. The waiters froze against the walls. And in that unbearable stillness, I realized the life I had built was crumbling. My marriage, my sacrifices, my silence, it had all led here to this stage of shame. My throat burned with words I could not release. My eyes blurred with tears I refused to shed. And then, across the marble floor, the sharp sound of footsteps began. The sound of those footsteps cracked through the silence like a warning, deliberate and heavy, each step echoing across the marble until the crowd parted instinctively, creating a path none dared to block. Travis walked toward the microphone with the steadiness of a man who knew every eye was upon him, his face carved with controlled fury, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. Rebecca's smile faltered, her hand tightening around Fernando's arm, a flicker of unease crossing her face for the first time all night. The groom reached the microphone and tapped it twice, the sharp metallic thump vibrating through the speakers and commanding silence, so absolute it felt as though the room itself had stopped breathing. His voice boomed low but thunderous, filling every corner, every ear, every heart. "Did you just slap the CEO of Caden Marketing?" The words slammed into the air like a hammer, shattering the illusion I had maintained for years. For a moment, time fractured. Faces turned toward me, eyes, wide mouths falling open. Recognition dawning one by one like light spreading across a field at sunrise. Gasps rolled like thunder whispers erupting into a wave of disbelief. Caden Marketing. Her. That is her. Oh my gosh, she is Sinclair. Phones appeared in hands screens glowing as frantic fingers typed my name into search bars. Within seconds, expressions shifted from confusion to awe, from pity to reverence, as headlines and images confirmed what Travis had spoken. Ruth Sinclair, Forbes covers, billion-dollar campaigns, industry titan. The woman they had seen humiliated was not invisible after all. Waiters who had been frozen against the walls suddenly surged forward, bowing awkwardly as they thrust napkins into my hands, their voices trembling. "Ma'am, please allow us. Let us clean this." I barely heard them. My pulse pounded too loudly, my mind a storm of disbelief and terror. The secret I had protected so fiercely was gone, stripped away in a single sentence. And in its place was a spotlight hotter than fire. Travis gripped the microphone tighter, his knuckles white, his chest rising with each breath as fury and disappointment laced his every word. "The woman you just slapped in front of 300 guests is not just any guest. She is the woman who built one of the greatest empires in marketing history. She is the reason I stand here as more than a dreamer with empty pockets. 5 years ago, when I was nothing but an architect with ideas too wild for anyone to back, Ruth believed in me. She fought for me when no one else would. She turned my vision into reality, and because of her, my firm exists today." His gaze swept the crowd, his words striking with the precision of arrows. "Some of you here have worked with her, some of you have benefited from her campaigns. Yet tonight, you all stood silent while she was assaulted in plain sight. A shudder rippled through the guests' heads, bowing eyes darting shame flickering in the air. Rebecca's complexion drained her cheeks chalk white against her crimson lipstick. She trembled, her bouquet slipping from her hands to the floor, unnoticed petals scattering like fallen dignity. Fernando's smugness evaporated, replaced by dawning horror. His mouth opened-closed, but no sound emerged, his eyes flickering between me and Travis as if searching for an escape that did not exist. Travis's voice grew sharper, angrier, the calm stripped away. Next week, we were set to announce the largest partnership in both our company's history. A $200 million deal, one that would make waves across the industry. The words hung heavy, each syllable like a stone dropping into water. Guests gasped anew, whispers crackling with the electricity of scandal. But after what I have witnessed tonight, after seeing my wife assault and humiliate the woman who made my career possible, after watching her brother defend cruelty instead of his own wife, I am not sure this partnership can move forward. The ballroom erupted in murmurs, a storm of voices, disbelief and alarm colliding. Investors among the guests stiffened their faces pale as they realized the magnitude of what was being threatened. Rebecca's knees buckled, her hand clinging desperately to Fernando's sleeve. "You cannot mean that," she stammered, her voice shaking. Travis turned toward her, his eyes cold, his tone merciless. "You just slapped a woman whose influence stretches across the globe. You poured wine on someone who has more grace and dignity in her little finger than you have shown in your entire life. And you did it not in private, but in front of hundreds of witnesses. What do you think the world will say when this story spreads by morning?" She whimpered, shaking her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, mascara streaking like ink. Fernando finally found his voice hoarse and trembling. "Ruth, why did you never tell me? Why did you hide who you were?" His desperation stung, but beneath it I heard only selfishness. He had not asked because he had not cared. He had never wanted to know. Would it have mattered? I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm around us. Would you have treated me with respect if you had known, or would you have just found new ways to make me feel small? Silence followed, thick and damning, his expression crumbling under the weight of truth. Travis looked back to the crowd, his voice rising once more strong and unwavering. "Tonight, you all saw something extraordinary. You saw a woman of immense power and influence choose to live humbly, quietly, putting family above status. And you saw that kindness repaid with cruelty." Shame swept across the room like a wave, guests shifting uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes, others staring at me with newfound reverence. The waiters hovered near, treating me with a reverence usually reserved for heads of state, their hands trembling as they dabbed at my stained dress. But I brushed them away. The stain no longer mattered. What mattered was the shift in the air, the recognition dawning in every face that the woman they had dismissed was no longer invisible. Rebecca sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking, her once radiant gown suddenly gaudy under the harsh glare of truth. Fernando stood pale, his tie crooked, his composure shattered. And I, standing in the pool of spilled wine, felt the mask I had worn for years crumble at last. For the first time in too long, I felt my spine straighten, my lungs fill, my heartbeat not with shame, but with clarity. Travis set the microphone down with deliberate care and stepped back, his gaze never leaving mine. The crowd waited, breaths held, eyes locked. The moment had shifted. The power had changed hands, and I knew with certainty that nothing in my life and any of our lives would ever be the same again. I felt my body move before my mind had caught up my heels, striking the marble as I walked slowly toward the microphone. The crowd parted without being asked, their eyes fixed on me as though the air itself demanded silence. My dress clung heavy with wine. My cheek burned where Rebecca's hand had landed, yet my spine was straight, my chin lifted. For years I had made myself small, but tonight there was no room left to shrink. I reached the microphone, my fingers curling around the cool metal, and the sound of my breath echoed faintly through the speakers. "Good evening." I began, my voice calm, but edged with steel. "I suppose introductions are in order. My name is Ruth Sinclair." A ripple passed through the room, though most had already realized. I am the CEO of Caden Marketing, and yes, what you have just witnessed happened not to some nameless woman, but to me. The words rang clear, resonant, carrying weight far beyond volume. For 3 years, I have lived as Ruth Matthews, the quiet wife, the dutiful sister-in-law, the invisible shadow who fetched drinks and carried boxes and smiled through insult after insult. I did this because I believed love required sacrifice. I believed family demanded patience. I believed that if I made myself small enough, quiet enough, maybe I would be accepted. I paused, my eyes finding Rebecca. She was pale, trembling mascara streaking down her cheeks, her once perfect gown trembling in her hands. Rebecca, I tried for years to love you as a sister. I endured your criticisms of my job, my clothes, my personality. I endured your demands for money, your dismissive words, your constant attempts to make me feel less. Tonight you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. You struck me, you poured wine on me, and you humiliated me in front of 300 witnesses. Her lips trembled as she shook her head, tears falling faster, but I pressed on. Your greatest mistake was not slapping me. Your greatest mistake was believing I was powerless. I turned to Fernando, then my heart clenching, but my voice unwavering. And you, my husband, the man who vowed to love and protect me. You did not stand beside me. You did not defend me. You wrapped your arm around the woman who attacked me and told me I should have known better. His face crumpled, his eyes desperate, but his mouth remained mute, his shame choking him. The pain in my chest tightened, but I forced myself to speak. For 3 years, I made myself smaller so you could feel larger. I let you believe you were the provider when I paid for the house, the vacations, the constant rescues for your sister's debts. I let you believe my career was minor, that I was lucky to have you because I thought love was enough. But tonight, you showed me the truth. Love was never enough for you. Respect was never part of what you offered. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between us, some nodding, some whispering in sympathy. My voice grew stronger, rising with each word. To everyone here, I want you to understand something. Power does not excuse cruelty. Success does not require silence, and no one should ever be asked to diminish themselves for love. The room was utterly silent, except for the pounding of my own heartbeat. Yet I felt strength pour into me with each breath. I looked back to Rebecca, her sobs now uncontrollable, her bouquet forgotten on the floor. You wanted to make me small, I said quietly but firmly. You wanted to destroy me with humiliation. But you have only destroyed your own image, your own marriage, your own reputation. And you did it with your own hands. Travis's gaze never wavered from me, pride flickering in his eyes, but I knew this was my moment alone. I turned back to Fernando. Tonight, you chose your sister over your wife. You humiliated me before strangers, treating me like a careless child. You have shown me exactly where your loyalty lies. His hand twitched as if he wanted to reach for me, but I raised mine to stop him. Do not, I said, my voice cold. Tonight is the last time you will call me your wife. A collective gasp rippled through the guests' whispers, sparking instantly, but I held firm. This marriage is over. I will not spend another day making myself smaller for a man who cannot see my worth. Fernando's face collapsed, his eyes wide with panic, his lips moving soundlessly. Ruth, please, he managed at last, his voice breaking. I love you. Forgive me. But the words rang hollow, empty, and I felt nothing but clarity. Love that requires erasure is not love. Love that chooses silence is not love. Love that bows to cruelty is not love. I released the microphone stand, the sound of my heels against marble amplified as I stepped back, the crowd opening around me like the Red Sea. Some guests reached toward me, their faces filled with awe. Others bowed their heads respectfully. The waiters hovered near, uncertain, but I waved them off. I no longer needed rescue. My voice had been enough. Rebecca sobbed. Fernando stood broken, and Travis's eyes gleamed with quiet admiration, but I did not linger on any of them. My truth had been spoken. The chains I had carried for 3 years had shattered in the span of minutes. I felt lighter, taller, stronger. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I needed to be, no longer silent, no longer invisible, no longer small. The ballroom held its breath as I stepped away from the microphone, my heels clicking like a drumbeat of finality. Rebecca crumpled onto a chair, her sobs racking her body, her veil askew, her perfect wedding, now a ruin of smeared mascara and stained silk. Fernando staggered after me, his voice breaking. "Ruth, please do not do this. We can fix it." But I did not slow. I did not turn. My steps carried me through the parted crowd, faces glowing with shock and awe. Some murmuring apologies, others reaching out as though to touch a fragment of strength they had just witnessed. Travis caught my eye as I passed, his gaze filled with something between respect and sorrow, but he did not stop me. He knew, as I knew, that the moment was mine alone. I pushed open the grand doors, and the night air swept over me cool and clean, washing the wine's stickiness from my skin with invisible hands. The stars glittered above like 1,000 watchful eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt their light not as judgment, but as benediction. Outside, the murmurs of the guests spilled after me stories already being spun, reputations already unraveling. By morning, the headlines would blaze, the videos would circulate, and Rebecca's slap would not be remembered as an act of power, but as a symbol of arrogance destroyed. I reached the waiting car, the chauffeur's eyes widening as he rushed to open the door. "Mrs. Sinclair," he whispered reverently, his voice tinged with awe. "Not Matthews. Sinclair." The name fit again like armor, like truth reclaimed. I slid into the leather seat, the weight of silence wrapping around me, not as suffocation, but as peace. The car pulled away, the manor shrinking behind me, its lights dimming into the distance until it was nothing more than a fading glow. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls from journalists, from colleagues, from board members who had all seen or heard by now. I let it buzz. I owed them nothing tonight. I owed only myself this quiet, this breath, this freedom. My cheek still throbbed, the wine still clung cold to my skin, but the sting of humiliation had evaporated, burned away by the fire of truth. For 3 years, I had lived in the shadows of others' expectations, silenced by love that was never love at all. Tonight, I had stepped into the light, and the light had not destroyed me. It had revealed me. By the time I reached my home, not ours for the deed, bore only my name. I felt the tremors in my hands fade. I walked inside the familiar scent of cedar and linen wrapping around me, the stillness of the house, a balm. I stripped off the ruined dress, letting it fall in a crimson-soaked heap on the floor, and stood before the mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes, swollen cheek bruised, but behind the damage I saw a woman reborn. Stronger, sharper, free. In the days that followed, the world erupted. Headlines screamed across every platform. CEO slapped at wedding humiliation goes viral. Sinclair speaks truth. Clips of Rebecca's slap and Travis's reveal spread like wildfire, dissected on talk shows, shared by millions, each replay hammering the coffin shut on her reputation. Investors pulled out of Fernando's projects, clients vanished from Rebecca's social circle, and invitations that once flooded their inboxes dried up overnight. Their empire of control crumbled, not because I fought in secret, but because their own cruelty had been exposed in the brightest of lights, and I, once invisible, was no longer overlooked. Colleagues reached out with respect, strangers with admiration, women with gratitude for words they had longed to hear spoken aloud. My voice, once silenced, had become a beacon. As for Fernando, he begged, he pleaded, he sent flowers and letters dripping with apologies, but I read none of them. Divorce papers were served swiftly, signed with steady hands, the ink drying like the closing of a chapter long overdue. I did not weep. I did not mourn. I walked forward. Rebecca, I later heard, retreated into seclusion, her marriage a hollow shell, her once bright image reduced to whispers of pity and disdain. Perhaps one day she would reflect, perhaps not. It was no longer my concern. I had given enough of my life to her shadow. Now it was my turn to live in light. One evening, weeks later, as I sat by the fire in my quiet home, a glass of wine in my hand, I realized that the greatest revenge had not been my words, nor the public collapse of their image, nor even the headlines that painted me as a woman wronged but victorious. The greatest revenge was simply this: I was free, and they would never be. The fire crackled, the night deepened, and for the first time in too many years, I smiled. Not the brittle smile of survival, but the steady smile of a woman who had reclaimed herself.